We bought the house because of the yard, wide, grassy, and fenced all the way around, perfect for our daughter to play in. After years of living in cramped apartments, it felt like space, like freedom. The house itself was old, wood creaked, pipes groaned, but it was solid. 2 stories and an attic we didn't bother opening the first few weeks. It was dusty and smelled like rot, sealed shut since the last owners moved out. We figured we'd deal with it later. We should have dealt with it then. It was a Saturday afternoon when I first noticed something was off. My daughter was outside, playing in the yard with chalk, humming to herself. I stepped onto the porch to bring her some juice. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. "What you drawing?" She smiled and looked up at the house. "At him," she said. I followed her gaze. She was staring at the attic window. At first I saw nothing, just the dirty glass and the pale curtains we hadn't touched. Then I looked closer. There was a handprint, small, on the inside of the window. I didn't want to scare her. I asked gently, "Who are you talking about?" She giggled and said, "The boy in the attic. He watches me play." That night I brought it up to my wife. She brushed it off. Probably just her imagination. You know how kids are. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That window, that handprint. The attic we hadn't touched since moving in. So after everyone went to bed, I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the creaky stairs. The attic door was stiff, the wood warped from time. When I finally forced it open, a cloud of dust choked the air. The room was empty, mostly. Old boxes, torn wallpaper, a broken rocking horse in the corner. But on the floor, directly beneath the window, was a circle of chalk drawings, childlike, fresh, stick figures. One small, one tall, both frowning. I cleaned the window the next day, wiped the handprint away. But that afternoon, my daughter pointed to the attic again. "He's back," she whispered. The drawings changed after that. She used to draw animals, flowers, family pictures. Now she drew the house, always the same, her outside, a boy in the attic window, watching. His face had no eyes, just dark, scribbled holes. One night, I passed her room and heard her talking. She was alone. I stepped in. She turned quickly, eyes wide as if I'd interrupted something. "Who were you talking to, honey?" I asked. She looked at the closet door. "Just him," she said. "He doesn't like when you come in." That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps above us, slow, heavy, pacing the attic. My wife didn't hear it. My daughter slept soundly, but I knew what I heard. I set up a camera the next day, just inside the attic door, motion activated. That night, the camera triggered at 2:14 a.m. The footage showed the empty attic. For a moment, then the rocking horse started moving, back and forth, slowly, and in the corner of the screen the chalk stick figure was being drawn, one line at a time, by nothing. I confronted my daughter. I didn't want to scare her, but I had to know. "Is he real?" I asked. "This boy in the attic?" She looked at me with blank eyes. "He was here before us," she whispered. "He doesn't like sharing his house." The attic door wouldn't open after that. It was locked, from the inside. I hadn't put a lock on it. The air in the house changed, heavier, colder. And at night, I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye. A shadow at the top of the stairs, the attic window glowing faintly, footsteps on the ceiling, pacing above our bed. And my daughter? She was changing, paler, quieter. She stopped calling him her friend. Now she called him her brother. One night, I woke up to the sound of her laughter. I rushed to her room. She was gone. The window was open. The ladder to the attic had been pulled down. I climbed. The attic was pitch black, only my flashlight cutting through the dust. The circle of drawings was back, but now there were 3 figures. One small, one tall, one lying down. Beside the chalk was a single fresh handprint, small, pressed in blood. Then I heard it, behind me, clicking, slow, like nails tapping the wood. I turned and saw them. My daughter standing in the dark, smiling, and beside her, him, a boy, or something like one. His face was wrong, stretched, skin gray and too smooth, as if it had been painted on. His eyes were hollow. His mouth was open just enough to see teeth, rows of them. He raised one hand, pointed at me, and whispered, "She's mine now." I don't know how I got back down. I don't remember the fall, only waking up in the hospital. They said I had a breakdown, that I tried to climb into the attic and fell. My wife and daughter were gone by then. They never found them. The attic was empty, but sometimes, when I walk past an old house or see an upstairs window, I see them. 2 figures, one watching, one smiling, and a handprint pressed against the glass. I woke up just after 2:30 a.m. At first, I wasn't sure what had stirred me. The house was still. No wind outside, no creaking floorboards, just silence. Then I heard it. A voice, soft, whispers, coming from down the hall. I sat up slowly, listening. It was my daughter's room. She was talking to someone. I got out of bed, careful not to wake my wife. The floor was cold beneath my feet as I stepped into the hallway. The glow of her nightlight spilled faintly beneath her door. As I got closer, the whispers became clearer. It was definitely her voice. "Okay," she was saying, "but I don't think Daddy will like that." Pause. Then, "Because he gets mad when I go outside at night." Another pause. Then she giggled. "No, I can't. You're not supposed to be in the house." I froze. I pushed open the door gently. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, facing the open closet, not looking at me, just staring into the dark. The closet door creaked slightly in the draft. But I saw nothing inside, just hanging clothes and toys. "Sweetheart," I whispered. She turned, smiling sleepily. "Hi, Daddy. Who are you talking to?" Her smile faded. She looked back at the closet and shrugged. "Just my friend." Kids and imaginary friends, right? I tried to laugh it off, but something about her voice, how flat it sounded, stuck with me. And that night, I didn't sleep. The next day, I asked her about it again. "Hey kiddo, what's your friend's name?" She frowned, picking at her cereal. "She doesn't have one." "She? What's she look like?" She tilted her head. "She doesn't look like people." I tried to keep my tone light. "What does she look like then?" She looked up at me and said, "Like if your shadow stood up and smiled." That night, I left her bedroom door open and kept mine cracked, just in case. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke again, no whispering this time. But the closet light in her room, something we never use, was on. I got out of bed and stepped quietly to her door. She was lying on her back now, staring at the ceiling, her eyes wide open. The light from the closet cast long, unnatural shadows across her face. "Daddy?" she said softly. I didn't speak. "She's standing next to you." I flipped on the bedroom light. Nothing. Just me and the open closet door. I checked every inch of that room, closet, under the bed, behind the curtains. But my daughter just watched me the whole time, smiling. "She doesn't like the light," she whispered. "But it's okay, she only wants to play." The next few nights were worse. I started hearing footsteps in the hallway, light at first, then louder, clicking sounds, like long fingernails tapping on the walls. My daughter's behavior changed. She stopped drawing animals and flowers. Now it was shadows, tall ones, with mouths drawn too wide, teeth like blades. One morning I found a drawing of our house. The windows were all black, and in her room a figure stood at the end of the bed, arms too long, fingers touching the floor. She had written one word across the top, "Her." That night, I set up a baby monitor, just in case. At 2:41 a.m. I woke to static, then a whisper, then my daughter's voice, "Okay, I'll do it." Then, another voice, not hers, older, lower, but not human. It said, "Take him to the closet." I ran, burst into her room. She wasn't in bed. The closet door was wide open. I fell to my knees and reached inside, searching, calling her name, and then she crawled out from under the bed, behind me, laughing. "Why are you in her room, Daddy?" she asked. I turned. The closet slammed shut. I tried to explain what happened to my wife. She didn't believe me. She thought I was overtired, stressed. But I saw it. I felt it. Something in that closet was watching me, us, waiting. Last night I heard the whisper again. This time not through the monitor, right behind me. I turned. Then I heard the closet creak open, and my daughter's voice. "She wants to meet you now." This morning my daughter won't speak to me. She just stares at the wall and smiles. The closet door is open again, and when I look inside, I see something moving in the dark. Something that grins when I do. Something that wears my daughter's voice and says, "She doesn't like you anymore, and neither do I." When we moved into the new house, my son started talking to someone who wasn't there. At first, I thought it was normal. Lots of kids have imaginary friends, especially after a big change. We'd uprooted our lives, new city, new jobs, new routines. The house was older, quiet, surrounded by woods that creaked at night and cast strange shadows through the windows. But I noticed things that didn't feel like part of a kid's imagination. It started small. "Who are you talking to? Buddy?" I asked one afternoon when I heard him whispering in the corner of his room. He looked up with that wide-eyed innocence only a 5-year-old can pull off and said, "I'm playing with Eli." "Is Eli someone from your school?" He shook his head. "No, he lives in the closet." I smiled, a little uneasy. "Oh yeah? What's Eli like?" He tilted his head. "He doesn't like you," I told my wife, and she laughed, said it was probably just a phase, but I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I found my wedding ring in the toilet. Later that week, the family photo on our nightstand was smashed, only my face shattered. One night, I woke up to my son standing at the side of the bed, staring at me. When I asked what was wrong, he whispered, "Eli says you shouldn't be here." Things got worse. I started hearing noises in the house, footsteps in the hallway, scratching at the walls, soft, muffled laughter through the baby monitor, even though we no longer had a baby. My son's drawings changed too. At first they were normal, stick figures, rainbows, smiley faces, but then they were all of Eli. He drew him over and over, tall, black eyes, no mouth, always hiding behind a door. One picture showed our house, me with a red X over my face, and Eli standing in the attic window. We'd never been in the attic. That night I got a ladder and opened the attic door, just a crawl space. Dust, insulation, old boards. Except there were footprints in the dust. Small, bare, leading in circles, and scratched into the wall in messy, uneven letters were the words, "He's watching you." I confronted my son. I knelt down and asked him gently who Eli really was. His lips quivered. He looked over my shoulder, then back at me. "Eli said if I tell, he'll take Mommy." I didn't sleep that night. Neither did my wife. We started hearing knocks on the walls, always around 3 a.m. One night, we woke up to every door in the house open. Every single one. Even the attic. We brought in a child psychologist. She spent an hour with him. When she came back, her face was pale. "What did he say?" I asked. She hesitated. "He says Eli is older than the house, that he was here before it was built. He says Eli doesn't like grown-ups." "What else?" She looked at me. "He said Eli told him you're the only one who can see him die." I started sleeping in the guest room after that. My wife didn't say it, but I could tell she was scared of what our son was becoming, of what I was becoming. And Eli was always there, even if we couldn't see him. Last night I woke up to whispering, 2 voices, my son's and something else. I crept down the hall toward his room. The door was cracked open. Inside, the nightlight cast long shadows. My son sat cross-legged on the floor, whispering toward the closet. He turned to look at me. "Daddy," he said, then his eyes rolled back, his mouth opened. And Eli spoke through him, in a voice that wasn't my son's, or even human. "I told you, you don't belong here." I ran to him, grabbed him, shook him. He blinked, looked confused. "What happened?" he asked. "Why are you scared?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Today, he won't talk to me. He laughs when I enter the room, but he doesn't look at me. He talks to Eli more now. Eli tells him things. Tonight, I heard him whisper, "It'll be better when Daddy's gone." Right now, I'm sitting in the living room. All the lights are on, the doors are all locked, but I still hear footsteps in the hallway. My son is asleep, I think. But I swear I just saw someone standing in the doorway behind me, and when I looked in the mirror, I wasn't in it. But Eli was. Working late at the office had become a habit of mine. The deadlines always seemed impossible, and my manager never hesitated to dump last-minute tasks on me. That night, the office was particularly quiet, the kind of stillness that makes you acutely aware of every sound, your own breathing, the hum of the air conditioning, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. It was well past 11 p.m., and I was the only one left on the floor. My colleagues had all gone home hours ago, laughing as they wished me luck with the pile of work I still had to finish. The open-plan office stretched out before me, empty cubicles bathed in the cold glow of fluorescent lights. The occasional flicker from the lights only added to the oppressive atmosphere. I had just finished reviewing the last report when I heard it, the soft chime of the elevator arriving. The sound startled me. No one else should have been here this late, and I hadn't called for the elevator. I stood up slowly, peering over the top of my cubicle toward the hallway that led to the elevators. The doors slid open with a faint hiss, and the light inside flickered. For a moment, I thought I saw something, a shadow shifting in the corner, but when I blinked, the elevator was empty. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone had pressed the button on another floor before leaving for the night. Still, a strange unease crept over me. The doors remained open longer than they should have, as if waiting for someone to step inside. When they finally closed, the soft chime echoed again, louder this time. I shook my head, laughing nervously at myself. "You're just tired," I muttered, trying to focus on packing up my things. But as I reached for my bag, the elevator chimed again. The sound made my heart jump. I turned toward the hallway, my palms sweating. This time the lights flickered not just inside the elevator, but in the hallway as well, casting strange, distorted shadows on the walls. The doors slid open again, and again it was empty. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. My rational mind told me it was just a malfunction, but something deeper, a primal instinct, warned me to stay away. I grabbed my phone and called the building's security desk, but the line crackled with static before going dead. "Great," I muttered, gripping my phone tightly. Just what I needed. The elevator doors closed again, the sound louder than before, almost like a warning. I decided it was time to leave. Whatever was happening, I didn't want to be around to find out. The stairs seemed like the safer option. I made my way to the stairwell, my heels clicking against the tiled floor. The heavy door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing the narrow, dimly lit staircase. The air here was colder, and the faint smell of mildew lingered in the corners. I started down, my footsteps echoing loudly in the empty space. The stairwell seemed endless, each floor blending into the next. I was about to reach the ground floor when I heard it, a faint shuffling noise coming from below me. I stopped, straining to listen. The sound grew louder, more deliberate, like someone dragging their feet against the concrete steps. My heart raced as I peered down the stairwell, but all I could see was darkness. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. The sound stopped. The silence was deafening, the air heavy with a sense of foreboding. And then, from above me, the elevator chimed again. My blood ran cold. I looked up through the gaps in the stairwell, and my breath caught in my throat. The elevator doors on every floor were open, lights flickering erratically, casting long, unnatural shadows. The shadows didn't stay still. They moved, slithering along the walls, crawling toward the stairs. I bolted down the remaining steps, my pulse pounding in my ears. I burst through the door to the lobby, desperate for the safety of the open space. But the lobby wasn't as I remembered it. The lights here were dimmer than they should have been, and the air was suffused with an unnatural chill. The large windows that usually looked out onto the street were fogged over, the faint outline of snow falling outside barely visible. The lobby was silent, except for the faint hum of the elevator. The elevator doors opened again. This time I didn't look. I headed straight for the main entrance, but the glass doors wouldn't budge. I pulled at them, pushed, even pounded on the glass, but they didn't move. The lock mechanism glowed faintly, as if mocking me. The elevator chimed behind me, louder now, insistent. I turned slowly, dread curling in my stomach. The elevator wasn't empty anymore. A figure stood inside, its outline distorted by the flickering light. It was tall, its limbs unnaturally thin, the suit it wore hanging loosely on its frame. The face was wrong, featureless except for two hollow pits where eyes should have been. It tilted its head as if studying me, and then stepped out of the elevator. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. The sound of its footsteps echoed in the empty lobby, a hollow, metallic clang that made my skin crawl. I backed away, searching desperately for another exit, but the figure moved faster than it should have, closing the distance between us. It stopped just a few feet away, its head tilting again. Then, in a voice that sounded like a dozen whispers layered together, it spoke. "Why are you still here?" My legs felt like lead, my mind screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. The figure raised one long, bony hand, pointing at me. "You're not supposed to leave." The lights flickered again, and for a brief moment, the entire lobby was bathed in darkness. When they came back on, the figure was gone. But the elevator doors were open again, the light inside pulsing like a heartbeat. Something inside me knew I didn't have a choice. My feet moved on their own, carrying me toward the elevator. The air grew colder with each step, and my vision blurred as the light from the elevator grew brighter, almost blinding. I stepped inside. The doors closed, and the elevator began to descend, but the numbers on the display didn't make sense. They weren't floors. They were random symbols, shapes I didn't recognize. The elevator's hum grew louder, the walls vibrating as if the entire structure were alive. When the doors opened again, I wasn't in the lobby. I wasn't in the building anymore. The space before me was vast and dark, the floor a mirror-like surface that reflected nothing. In the distance, shadows moved, twisted, writhing forms that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The air was heavy, filled with whispers that I couldn't understand but felt deep in my bones. The figure from the elevator was there, standing at the edge of the darkness. It turned to me, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. "This is where you belong," it said, its voice echoing in the emptiness. And then the elevator doors closed. The last thing I saw was the figure reaching out toward me, its skeletal hand disappearing into the dark as the elevator began to rise. When the doors opened again, I was back in the lobby. Everything looked normal. Bright lights, clear windows, the hum of the building returning to its mundane rhythm. But I knew it wasn't over. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed darker, deeper, and the air carried a faint, familiar chill. I stepped outside into the snowy night, but as I turned to look back at the building, the elevator chimed one last time, its doors opening in the distance. Empty, waiting. Working late at the office was nothing new for me. Deadlines were relentless, and my boss seemed to thrive on assigning last-minute tasks just as everyone else clocked out. That night was no different. By the time I saved the final draft of the report and powered down my computer, the clock on my desk read 11:48 p.m. The building was eerily quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of the vending machine the only sounds. My office was on the 15th floor of a sleek, modern high-rise in the city. At night, the polished glass walls reflected the empty, dimly lit workspace, amplifying the sense of isolation. I grabbed my coat and bag, yawning as I made my way to the elevators. The hallways were deserted, the kind of silence that felt heavy, almost oppressive. As I reached the elevator bank and pressed the down button, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, but the hallway behind me was empty. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, its stainless steel doors sliding open to reveal an empty car. I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. The doors closed smoothly and the elevator began its descent. At first, everything was normal. The soft hum of the elevator motor and the subtle vibration of the car were oddly comforting. But as the numbers on the display ticked down, the elevator didn't stop at the lobby. Instead, it kept going. I frowned watching as the display continued past the lobby level, B1, B2, B3. I hadn't pressed the basement button. In fact, I wasn't even sure anyone ever went down there. The basement levels were used for storage, maintenance, and utilities, places no one had a reason to visit, especially at this hour. The elevator slowed to a stop at B4, and the doors slid open. Darkness greeted me. The fluorescent lights in the corridor beyond were flickering sporadically, casting erratic shadows on the walls. A faint, musty smell wafted into the elevator, damp concrete mixed with something metallic and sour. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the button for the lobby. But no matter how many times I pressed it, the doors didn't close. The elevator just sat there, waiting, as if it expected me to step out. "Great," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. Stuck in a horror movie cliché. I leaned out slightly, peering into the dim corridor. It stretched in both directions, the walls lined with exposed pipes and conduits. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed down the hallway, swallowed quickly by the silence. I pressed the door close button again, harder this time. The elevator refused to budge. Instead, the overhead light inside the car flickered once, then dimmed. My stomach twisted with unease. A faint sound broke the silence, a low, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere down the hall. It was slow and deliberate, like someone tapping a hard object against the concrete floor. I froze, straining to pinpoint the source. The sound grew louder, closer, but I couldn't see anything in the flickering light. And then it stopped. The elevator doors started to close on their own, and I exhaled a shaky breath of relief. But just as they were about to seal shut, something moved at the edge of the light, a shadow, too large and too distorted to be human. The doors closed, and the elevator began to ascend. I sagged against the wall, my heart pounding. But my relief was short-lived. The elevator shuddered to a stop at B3. The doors opened again. This time, the hallway was brighter. The lights were steady, casting an unnatural, sterile glow over the space. But the layout was identical: exposed pipes, damp walls, and a faint chill in the air. The smell was stronger here, the metallic tang of rust or blood more pronounced. I jabbed at the lobby button, then the emergency button. Neither responded. The elevator stayed stubbornly on B3, its doors open, as if daring me to step out. I stayed rooted to the spot, gripping the handrail, my knuckles white. The low tapping noise returned, this time coming from multiple directions. It wasn't just one sound, it was several, overlapping, like a dozen people tapping in unison. A faint whisper joined the tapping. At first, it was so soft I thought I was imagining it, but it grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't a language I recognized, just a garbled murmur that seemed to seep into my mind, making my skin crawl. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice cracking. "Who's there?" The whisper stopped abruptly. The lights flickered once, plunging the hallway into total darkness. For a moment there was nothing, just the oppressive silence and the pounding of my heart. And then, in the pitch black, a voice came from the hallway. Deep, guttural, and impossibly close. "You don't belong here," I screamed, slamming my fist against the buttons. The elevator doors closed, and the car jolted upward. I clung to the railing, my pulse racing as the display ticked up past B2, B1, and finally toward the lobby. The elevator stopped at the lobby, the doors sliding open to reveal the familiar reception area. But something was wrong. The lights here were dimmer than they should have been, and the air was heavy, suffused with a faint hum that I couldn't place. I stepped out cautiously, glancing around. The front desk was empty, and the glass doors leading to the street were fogged over, the snow outside barely visible. The hum grew louder, reverberating in my chest, and I turned back to the elevator. The doors were still open, but the inside of the car was no longer the stainless steel I'd just been in. The walls were dark, almost black, and seemed to pulse faintly, like they were alive. The buttons glowed with an unnatural red light, and the faint whispering I'd heard in the basement was louder now, spilling out into the lobby. A hand emerged from the darkness of the elevator, long and skeletal, its fingers impossibly thin. Another hand followed, gripping the edge of the doorway as a figure began to crawl out. It was tall, its limbs stretched and unnatural, its skin pale and waxy. Its face was featureless, except for a wide, jagged mouth that twisted into a grin as it turned toward me. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the front desk and falling to the floor. The creature stepped fully out of the elevator, its head tilting as it studied me. "You opened the door," it said, its voice a chorus of overlapping tones. "Now you're part of this." It moved toward me, its footsteps eerily silent. I scrambled to my feet, running toward the glass doors. They didn't budge. The creature's reflection loomed behind me, its grin widening. The last thing I saw before the lights went out was its hand reaching for my shoulder, and the whispering growing deafeningly loud, drowning out everything else. When I woke up, I was in the basement, sitting on the cold, damp floor. The elevator was gone, and the hallway stretched endlessly in both directions. And from somewhere in the distance, the tapping started again. The clock on my desk read 11:13 p.m., and the office was dead silent. It wasn't unusual for me to stay late, especially when deadlines loomed. Everyone else had left hours ago, their goodbyes echoing in the empty halls as they filed out one by one. I had told them, as I always did, just one more hour, knowing full well it would be much longer. The office had a strange atmosphere at night. The usual hum of conversations, ringing phones, and the clatter of keyboards was replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. The fluorescent lights cast a pale, sterile glow over the rows of empty cubicles, making the shadows in the corners seem darker. I was finishing up the last of my reports when it happened. My office phone, the one that rarely rang even during the day, suddenly buzzed to life. The sharp ring made me jump, the sound almost deafening in the stillness. I frowned, staring at the phone. Who would be calling at this hour? Hesitant, I picked up the receiver. Hello? There was no answer, just static, a faint, crackling hiss that sent a shiver down my spine. I pulled the phone away from my ear, checking the display. The screen showed nothing, no number, just a blank, glowing surface. Hello? I tried again, my voice louder, more forceful. The static grew louder for a moment, then abruptly stopped. The line went dead. I hung up, trying to shake the unease creeping over me. It was probably just a glitch, I told myself, or maybe someone misdialing. But something about the call didn't feel right. The air in the office felt colder now, heavier, as if the silence had deepened. I returned to my work, trying to focus, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The faint sound of typing echoed from somewhere in the distance. I froze, straining to listen. It was faint but distinct, the rhythmic clatter of keys hitting the keyboard. I stood, peering over the top of my cubicle toward the open-plan office. The rows of desks were empty, their screens dark. The sound stopped as abruptly as it had started. Hello? I called out, my voice trembling slightly. Is someone there? Silence. I sat back down, shaking my head. You're just tired, I muttered. But I couldn't ignore the way the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, or the way every creak and groan of the building seemed amplified. The phone rang again. I jumped, my heart pounding in my chest. I stared at the receiver as it buzzed insistently, the sharp sound cutting through the silence like a knife. I hesitated for a long moment before picking it up. Who is this? I demanded, my voice shaking. The static returned, louder this time, interspersed with faint clicks and pops. And then, beneath the noise, I heard something, a voice. It was faint, almost drowned out by the static, but it was there. You shouldn't be here, the voice whispered. I froze, the receiver pressed to my ear. What? I whispered back, my mouth dry. Who is this? You shouldn't be here. The line went dead again. I slammed the receiver down, my hands trembling. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a prank? A coworker messing with me? But I knew that wasn't it. The voice, the static, it had felt wrong, like it wasn't coming from anywhere I could understand. I decided I'd had enough. Whatever work was left could wait until morning. I grabbed my bag and jacket, shutting down my computer. The office felt suffocating now, the shadows pressing in around me. As I headed for the elevator, the lights above flickered, plunging the hallway into momentary darkness. When they came back on, I thought I saw movement, just a flicker, a shadow darting across the far end of the office. I quickened my pace, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I was almost out. And then the elevator stopped. The doors didn't open. The lights inside the car flickered, and the display above the doors went blank. I pressed the buttons frantically, but nothing happened. The elevator hummed softly, as if alive, but it didn't move. The phone in the elevator rang. I stared at it, my chest tightening. Slowly, I reached out and picked up the receiver. Hello? I whispered. The static returned, louder than before, almost deafening. And then, beneath it, the voice spoke again. They see you. Who? Who sees me? I demanded, my voice rising in panic. The line crackled, and then the voice whispered a single word, run. The elevator shuddered and began to descend, not to the lobby, but lower. The display above the doors flickered back to life, showing numbers I didn't recognize. They weren't floors, they were symbols, strange and jagged, glowing faintly. When the elevator stopped, the doors slid open to reveal a dark, empty hallway. The air was icy cold, and the faint smell of mildew and decay wafted in. I didn't want to step out, but the elevator wouldn't close. The buttons inside were dead, the light flickering overhead. I had no choice. The hallway was silent, the walls lined with pipes that dripped with condensation. My footsteps echoed as I walked, each step feeling heavier, more labored. The shadows seemed to move, shifting in the corners of my vision. Hello? I called out, my voice trembling. The static sound returned, not from a phone this time, but from somewhere ahead of me. It grew louder as I moved forward, until I reached a door at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, a faint light spilling out. I pushed it open, my breath hitching. Inside was an office, a perfect replica of my own, down to the papers scattered on the desk. The computer screen was on, displaying a blank document. The phone on the desk rang. I didn't want to answer it, but my hand moved on its own, picking up the receiver. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice said, clearer now. "What do you want?" I whispered. "To join us." The lights flickered and the room grew colder. Shadows crept along the walls, gathering in the corners, coalescing into shapes. Faces began to form, hollow eyes and twisted mouths, all staring at me. I dropped the phone, stumbling back. The shadows moved toward me, the faces whispering in unison. "Stay with us." I turned and ran, my breath coming in short gasps. The hallway seemed endless, stretching out before me no matter how far I ran. The whispers followed, growing louder, more insistent. And then I saw it, a figure standing at the end of the hallway, silhouetted against the flickering light. It was tall and thin, its face featureless except for a wide, jagged grin. The elevator doors stood open behind it. I ran toward the figure, desperation overpowering my fear. As I got closer, it didn't move, didn't react, but its grin widened, impossibly wide, stretching across its entire face. I dove into the elevator, slamming the close button. The doors shut just as the figure stepped forward, its hand reaching for me. The elevator began to rise, the lights flickering erratically. I collapsed against the wall, trembling. When the doors opened again, I was back in the lobby. But something was wrong. The air felt heavy, and the shadows in the corners were darker, shifting unnaturally. And then the phone at the reception desk began to ring. I had lived in my apartment for nearly 2 years, and in all that time, my neighbor, Mr. Holloway, had never been much of a talker. He was quiet, kept to himself, and barely made a sound through the thin walls that separated our units. In a building full of late-night partiers and screaming couples, he was the ideal neighbor. That is, until the night he started sleepwalking. The first time it happened, I woke up to a soft knocking at my door. It was around 2:30 a.m., and at first I thought I had imagined it. The city never really slept, and random noises weren't unusual. But then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, rhythmic, too deliberate. I groggily pulled myself out of bed, rubbing my eyes as I stumbled to the door. My apartment was small, just a cramped living room, a tiny kitchen, and a single hallway leading to the front entrance. As I got closer, I hesitated. Something about the knocking felt wrong. It wasn't hurried, like someone desperate to get inside. It wasn't soft, like a neighbor needing a favor. It was empty, mechanical, like someone knocking just for the sake of knocking. I peeked through the peephole. It was Mr. Holloway. He was standing completely still, his forehead pressed lightly against the door. His hands hung limply at his sides, fingers twitching slightly. His body was completely relaxed, except for his face. His lips were stretched into a wide, unnatural smile. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at him through the peephole, my pulse hammering in my ears. His eyes were open, but they weren't looking at anything. They were unfocused, glassy, as if he were staring through the door rather than at it. His smile never wavered. "Mr. Holloway?" I whispered, barely loud enough to hear myself. He didn't respond. He just stood there, smiling. I swallowed hard. My gut told me not to open the door, that something was deeply, terribly wrong. But he was my neighbor. Maybe he needed help. I hesitated, then spoke louder. "Hey, are you okay?" The second the words left my mouth, his head twitched. A quick, sudden jerk, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. Then, in a voice that didn't quite sound like his own, he whispered, "Let me in." A wave of pure, ice-cold dread washed over me. I stepped back, my hands shaking. "You're sleepwalking, Mr. Holloway," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Go back to bed." He didn't move. He didn't blink. The smile never left his face. Then, slowly, so horribly slowly, his head tilted to one side. The motion was unnatural, too smooth, as if his neck was too loose. I backed away. Then, without warning, he slammed his forehead against the door. Bang! I jumped, sucking in a sharp breath. Bang! 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 Harder now, louder, his head cracking against the wood over and over, the force shaking the doorframe. I stumbled back toward my bedroom, my hands scrambling for my phone. Call the police, call the landlord, call someone. But before I could dial, the knocking stopped. Silence. I hesitated, my breath ragged. Slowly I crept forward and peeked through the peephole again. He was gone. The next morning I tried to convince myself it was just a weird one-time thing. Maybe he had a sleeping disorder. Maybe he had been drinking. I avoided him all day, not wanting to bring it up. But that night, just as I was about to drift off to sleep, knock, knock, knock. I bolted upright, my body flooding with adrenaline. I crept to the door, every instinct screaming at me not to look, but I had to know. I peered through the peephole. He was back, standing exactly where he had been the night before. Same clothes, same posture, same horrible empty smile. Only this time, something was different. His eyes were bleeding. Thin trails of red leaked from his tear ducts, running down his cheeks like ink. But his smile never faltered. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, he was gone again. I tried to act normal, but the dread never left me. And then the next night, knock, knock, knock. I sat in my bed, frozen, staring at my bedroom door. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't answer. I didn't need to check. I already knew it was him. The knocking continued for hours, but eventually, I fell asleep. And when I woke up, my front door was unlocked. That was the last straw. I went straight to the landlord, demanded answers. At first, he looked confused. Mr. Holloway, he moved out weeks ago. My stomach dropped. No, he's still in 4B. The landlord shook his head. That apartment's empty. Has been ever since he hesitated. Since he what? I demanded. The landlord exhaled, running a hand over his face. Since he died, he muttered. The world tilted. No, that wasn't possible. You're lying, I whispered. I saw him. He was knocking on my door. He hanged himself, the landlord interrupted, his voice flat. In his bedroom. The cleaners found him 2 weeks ago. No family, no next of kin. The unit's been empty ever since. My mind reeled. 2 weeks ago? But I had seen him, spoken to him. I staggered back toward my apartment, my blood running ice cold. And that night, just as I lay down, trying to convince myself it was all in my head, knock, knock, knock. My breath stopped. I turned my head slowly, staring at my bedroom door. The knocking was coming from inside my apartment, from the closet, and then through the thin wood in that same eerie, broken whisper, "Let me in." It started small, little things. At first, I didn't even think much of it. Maybe I was tired, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but then it got worse. And now, I don't know if I'm living with my girlfriend anymore, or if something else has taken her place. We had been together for 2 years. Anna was always the calm, level-headed one, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make it feel warm. She had this laugh, this real, genuine laugh that could pull you out of the darkest mood. We had just moved in together, renting a small apartment in an older building downtown. The place had character. High ceilings, wooden floors, antique fixtures. There was something cozy about it, something lived in. And then we found the mirror. It was in the bedroom closet, shoved behind a pile of old coats left by the previous tenant. A tall, ornate thing, framed in black wood with intricate carvings along the edges. It looked expensive, the kind of thing you'd find in an old Victorian house. Anna loved it instantly. "I think it gives the room personality," she said, smiling as she positioned it against the wall near our bed. I wasn't so sure. Something about it made my skin crawl. The first time she sleepwalked, I thought it was just stress. I woke up to the sound of soft whispers. I turned over, reaching for Anna, but she wasn't in bed. She was standing in front of the mirror. Her reflection was wrong. Not her exactly. Her posture was stiff, unnatural. Her head was tilted slightly, her lips moving in a hushed, urgent whisper. "Anna?" I called softly. She didn't react. I climbed out of bed, cautiously approaching her. She was barefoot, standing completely still, her fingers twitching at her sides. As I got closer, I realized I could hear another voice. It wasn't coming from her. It was coming from the mirror. A faint, whispering reply. I grabbed her arm, gently shaking her. She inhaled sharply like she had been underwater and turned to me, her eyes glassy and unfocused. Then she blinked. "What?" she murmured, confused. "You were sleepwalking," I said, my voice unsteady. She frowned. "No, I wasn't. I was just sleeping." I stared at her. "Anna, you were talking to the mirror." She laughed, but there was unease in it. "That's creepy. Don't mess with me." "I'm not." her expression faltered. She turned back to the mirror, staring at her reflection. Maybe I was dreaming, but I wasn't convinced. The next night, it happened again, and the night after that. Every time, it was the same. She would get out of bed, stand in front of the mirror, and talk, and every time I could hear the mirror whispering back. I started staying awake to watch her. One night, I recorded her. When I played it back the next morning, her voice was clear, whispering things I couldn't understand. But the second voice was gone, like it had never been there at all. Anna just laughed when I showed her. I must be stressed, but I could see it in her eyes. She was scared. Then one night it changed. I woke up again to find her standing in front of the mirror, but this time she wasn't whispering. She was crying. Her whole body was trembling, her fingers digging into her arms. I rushed to her, placing my hands on her shoulders. "Anna, baby, wake up!" She turned her head slowly, like something was pulling her attention away from the mirror. But her reflection didn't move. I felt the air drain from the room. I looked from Anna to the mirror, and my stomach twisted violently. Her reflection was still facing forward, still staring at me. And then, it smiled. I pulled her away. I dragged her back to bed, my hands shaking. She murmured something under her breath, still half asleep, but I didn't care. I threw the covers over us and held her tight, my body rigid with fear. I didn't sleep that night. And in the morning, she didn't remember any of it. Not the mirror, not the crying, not the thing wearing her face. She just smiled sleepily and kissed my cheek. "You look like you saw a ghost." I nearly laughed. I nearly told her. But what if she didn't believe me? What if she already knew? The next night I made a decision. I waited until she fell asleep. Then, as quietly as I could, I grabbed a blanket, draped it over the mirror, and turned it to face the wall. Then I locked our bedroom door. But at exactly 3:12 a.m., I woke up to the sound of fabric rustling. The blanket had been pulled off, and Anna was standing in front of the mirror again. Only this time, she was looking at me. "Baby, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. But she wasn't awake. Her lips curled into that wrong, too wide smile, her fingers twitching. And then in a voice that wasn't quite her own, she whispered, "You shouldn't have covered it." I bolted out of bed, yanking her away from the mirror. She let out a gasp, her body convulsing. Then she collapsed against me. She was breathing heavily, her skin clammy with sweat. "What happened?" she whimpered. I held her, heart pounding in my chest. But over her shoulder, I saw something. The mirror. It was no longer showing our reflection. It was showing the bedroom, but we weren't in it. That was last night. Anna doesn't remember. She doesn't remember any of it. But I do. And I know, without a doubt, that the thing in the mirror, the thing that was wearing her face, is still in there, watching, waiting. It started with little things. At first I thought I was just tired, maybe forgetting where I put things. I'd wake up and find the TV remote in the fridge, my phone charger unplugged, the living room light on when I was sure I had turned it off. Then one morning, I woke up and found the front door unlocked. That scared me. I lived alone. I was always careful. I told myself I must have forgotten to lock it, but deep down, something felt off. Then 2 nights later, I woke up with mud on my feet. That's when I knew something was wrong. I decided to set up cameras. I told myself it was just to ease my mind, to prove that I was just sleepwalking and nothing more. Maybe I was just getting up in the middle of the night and not remembering it. I bought a cheap set of motion-activated cameras and set them up. One in my bedroom, one in the living room, and another by the front door. If I was really sleepwalking, I wanted to see it for myself. That night, I went to bed feeling a little ridiculous, but relieved. By morning, I wasn't so sure anymore. Because when I checked the footage, I saw myself, standing in the dark, smiling. I watched the recording over and over, my stomach twisting. At around 2:47 a.m., my sleeping body sat up perfectly straight, like a puppet being yanked upright by invisible strings. Then, without hesitation, I turned my head toward the camera, and I smiled. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't awake, either. I was just sitting there, staring, smiling directly at the camera, my head tilted at an unnatural angle. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., I got up. But I didn't move like a person. I moved too smoothly, like I was gliding just above the floor. My feet barely lifted, my arms swinging slightly as if something was pulling me forward. I walked straight out of my bedroom into the dark hallway. Then, just as I disappeared out of frame, the camera glitched. The footage skipped forward, and suddenly I was back in bed, as if I had never gotten up at all. I sat there for hours, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Was it a trick of the camera, a glitch, or was I losing my mind? I checked the other recordings. The front door camera showed me stepping outside, barefoot, dressed in my pajamas, at 3:02 a.m. But I didn't go anywhere. I just stood there, facing the dark street, motionless. The camera audio picked up whispers, but I couldn't tell if it was me talking or something else. Then, at 3:10 a.m., I turned around and walked back inside. The moment I stepped through the door, the footage glitched again. I was gone. Then, the next frame, I was back in bed. That was the first night. The next night, I forced myself to stay awake. I had to see it with my own eyes. I left the cameras rolling, watching the live feed on my laptop as I lay in bed. My body was tense, every muscle coiled with anxiety. Hours passed, nothing happened. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., the screen flickered, and I wasn't in bed anymore. My heart stopped. I hadn't moved. I would have felt it. But the footage showed something else. My body, or something wearing my body, was standing by the bedroom door, staring out into the hallway. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move, my limbs stiff with terror. I turned my head slowly, and my bed was empty. The blankets were folded neatly, the pillow untouched. I was gone, but I was still here. My pulse pounded in my ears. I grabbed my phone, switched to the front door camera, and there I was, standing outside, staring right at the camera. My mouth was moving, but the audio was silent. My hands hung limply at my sides, my head tilted slightly. Then I looked up, right into the camera, and for the first time I saw my own eyes. They were empty, black, and then my mouth stretched open, wider than a human mouth should go, and the camera cut to static. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I knew, it was morning. I was in bed, the covers pulled up neatly, like nothing had happened. But when I checked my phone, the videos were still there. I had proof, and that's when I noticed something new. A new recording, one I didn't remember setting up. 3:12 a.m., a new angle. The camera was in the hallway now, facing my bedroom door. With shaking hands, I clicked play. The video started in silence. Then, a soft creak. The bedroom door opened slowly. I stepped out, only it wasn't me. It looked like me, moved like me, but its mouth was still open. Its jaw unhinged, hanging too far down like something else was inside, trying to get out. Then, it turned, and it wasn't looking at the camera anymore. It was looking at me, staring directly at the lens as if it knew. Then, in a whisper so soft I almost didn't hear it, it spoke, and it said, "You don't have to watch anymore, just let me in." The video cut to black, and the moment it did, a soft knock sounded at my bedroom door. Knock, knock, knock. I'm not asleep right now, but I think something else is, and I think when it wakes up, I won't be here anymore. It was supposed to be a simple overnight stay. The drive had taken longer than expected, and by the time I reached the small, isolated town, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. The streets were empty, the shops closed, and the only sign of life was the faint glow of a single neon sign blinking, the Hollow Oak Inn. I pulled into the parking lot, exhausted and desperate for sleep. The hotel was an old, creaking structure, its wooden facade weathered and cracked. It looked like it had been plucked from another era, its charm long faded into something far less inviting. The woman at the front desk was pale and gaunt, her expression unreadable. Her voice was soft but flat as she handed me the key to room 13, the only available room for the night. I hesitated for a moment. It seemed like a bad omen, but I was too tired to argue. The hallway leading to the room was dimly lit, the old carpet muffling my footsteps. Room 13 was at the very end, its brass numbers tarnished and crooked. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, a strange smell greeted me, a mix of dust, old wood, and something faintly sweet like decaying flowers. The room was small and cluttered, its decor outdated by at least half a century. The bed was covered in a faded quilt, the wallpaper yellowed with age. But it wasn't the peeling wallpaper or the sagging furniture that unsettled me. It was the dolls. They were everywhere, lining the shelves, perched on the dresser, even sitting on the bed. Each one was different. Some porcelain, others cloth, their faces frozen in expressions that ranged from serene to unnervingly lifelike. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow me as I moved around the room, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me. I told myself it was silly. They were just dolls, after all. Creepy, sure, but harmless. I shoved my bag into the corner and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the collection. That's when I noticed the doll in the rocking chair. It was larger than the others, dressed in an old-fashioned lace gown with ribbons in its blonde hair. Its face was porcelain, its painted lips curled into a faint smile. Unlike the others, its eyes weren't glass, but something darker, more lifelike. The chair rocked gently, as if it had just been nudged. I froze, staring at the doll, my heart pounding in my chest. Had it moved? Or had the rocking chair already been swaying when I entered the room? Shaking my head, I dismissed the thought. "You're just tired," I muttered, lying back on the bed and closing my eyes. The dolls were unnerving, but I could deal with them for one night. I woke up sometime later to a soft creaking sound. It was faint, almost rhythmic, and it took me a moment to place it, the rocking chair. I sat up slowly, my eyes adjusting to the dim light from the single lamp I'd left on. The chair was moving, the doll still sitting upright, its face turned slightly toward me. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't left the chair rocking. I was sure of it. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The room was silent except for the creak of the chair. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, grabbing my phone and turning on its flashlight. The beam illuminated the chair, the doll's smile seeming wider now, its head tilted at an angle it hadn't been before. My skin prickled, and a deep unease settled in my chest. I stood, moving toward the chair slowly, the flashlight trembling in my hand. "It's just a doll," I whispered to myself. "It can't hurt you." As I reached the chair, the rocking stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was suffocating. I leaned in closer, inspecting the doll's face. Its eyes seemed darker than before, almost alive. A faint sound broke the silence, a soft, childlike giggle. My blood ran cold. I spun around, aiming the flashlight at the room, but there was nothing there. Just the rows of dolls, their empty eyes staring back at me. When I turned back to the rocking chair, the doll was gone. Panic set in. I searched the room frantically, shining the flashlight into every corner, under the bed, behind the dresser. The doll was nowhere to be found. Another giggle echoed through the room, this time louder, coming from the shadows near the closet. The door was ajar, the darkness inside seeming impossibly deep. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to leave, but something compelled me to move closer. I reached the closet, my hand trembling as I pushed the door open. The beam of my flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing only old, moth-eaten clothes hanging limply on their hangers. I exhaled shakily, relieved. Then the clothes shifted, parting slightly, and the doll's face appeared between them, its smile wider than ever. Its eyes blinked. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the bed and falling hard onto the floor. The doll stepped out of the closet, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. It tilted its head, watching me, and then it spoke. "Stay," it whispered, its voice high-pitched and distorted. "Stay and play." I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding as I backed toward the door. The doll moved closer, its steps slow but deliberate, its head twitching unnaturally with each movement. I grabbed the doorknob, twisting it frantically, but it wouldn't budge. The room grew colder, and the other dolls began to shift, their heads turning to watch me. Some of them began to giggle, their laughter mingling with the whispers that now filled the air. "Stay with us." The doll from the rocking chair was just a few feet away now, its lifeless eyes fixed on mine, its porcelain face cracked slightly, revealing something dark and pulsating beneath. "Forever," it hissed. In a surge of adrenaline, I threw my shoulder against the door, the wood splintering as it finally gave way. I bolted down the hallway, the sound of giggles and whispers following me. The walls seemed to close in, the lights flickering as I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside. the cold night air burning my lungs. The inn loomed behind me, its windows dark, the rocking chair faintly visible through the window of room 13. It was empty. I got into my car and drove until the inn was nothing more than a distant memory. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that I brought something with me, that somewhere, in the shadows of my home, the doll is watching, waiting. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear the faint creak of a rocking chair. Moving into a new house was supposed to be a fresh start. We'd saved for years to buy our dream home, a sprawling Victorian with tall, narrow windows, a wraparound porch, and a mysterious charm that captivated us the moment we saw it. My wife Emily and I knew it needed some work, but it felt perfect for our family. Our daughter Lily was especially excited. At 7 years old, she had a vivid imagination and a fascination with all things whimsical. The house was over a century old, its walls steeped in history. There were quirks we loved, creaky floorboards, hidden nooks, and an attic I hadn't fully explored. It was a space I planned to turn into storage, but Lily was already calling it her secret hideout. The first few days were chaotic, unpacking box after box and figuring out how to arrange our lives in this massive new space. Lily, ever curious, spent most of her time exploring. One afternoon, as Emily and I wrestled with a particularly stubborn bookshelf, Lily came bounding down the stairs, her arms cradling something. "Look what I found in the attic," she exclaimed, her blue eyes wide with excitement. It was a doll, old and intricately detailed. Its porcelain face was pale, its cheeks painted with a faint blush. It had piercing blue glass eyes that seemed almost too real, and dark ringlets of hair that framed its face. It wore a faded dress of lace and silk, its fabric yellowed with age. "Isn't she pretty?" Lily asked, holding the doll up for us to see. Emily and I exchanged a glance. The doll was beautiful in a way that felt unsettling. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was something about the way its eyes seemed to follow you. "Where did you find that?" I asked. "In a box in the attic," Lily replied. "It was just sitting there, all by itself." Emily forced a smile. "Well, she's lovely. Why don't you put her on your shelf for now?" Lily nodded, clutching the doll tightly. "Her name's Annabelle," she said with certainty, as if the doll had told her its name. "Annabelle?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "How'd you come up with that?" Lily shrugged. "She just looks like an Annabelle." That night, after we'd tucked Lily into bed, I found myself thinking about the doll. I didn't want to admit it, but it unsettled me. I decided to check the attic, curious about what else might be up there. The space was cold and dusty, filled with cobwebs and the scent of mildew. Most of the boxes contained nothing but old clothes and forgotten trinkets, but the box where Lily had found the doll caught my eye. It was a small wooden crate, the inside lined with faded velvet. Carved into the lid was a name, Annabelle. My chest tightened. I pulled the box closer, searching for clues about its origin. There were scraps of paper inside, old and brittle, written in a language I didn't recognize. One of the pages had a crude drawing of a doll, surrounded by symbols that sent a chill down my spine. Something about the whole thing felt wrong. I decided to put the box back and leave the attic, telling myself it was just my imagination. That night, I woke to the sound of footsteps. They were soft and deliberate, the kind of sound a child might make when sneaking around. I glanced at the clock, 3:14 a.m. Groaning, I rolled out of bed and padded into the hallway. The sound was coming from Lily's room. I pushed her door open gently, peering inside. Lily was sound asleep, her small form curled up beneath her blanket. Annabelle sat on the shelf by the window, bathed in moonlight. I stared at the doll, unease prickling at the back of my neck. I could have sworn its head was tilted at a slightly different angle than it had been earlier. Shaking off the thought, I closed Lily's door and went back to bed. The next morning, things got stranger. Emily was making breakfast when Lily came downstairs, clutching the doll. "Annabelle was talking to me last night," she said matter-of-factly, setting the doll on the kitchen table. Emily and I froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Emily asked, forcing a smile. Lily looked at us like we were silly for asking. "She was telling me about her old family. She said she misses them." My stomach dropped. "Lily, it's just a doll," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. It can't talk, Lily frowned. But she did. She told me she likes it here. Emily and I exchanged a worried glance, but we didn't press the issue. Kids had vivid imaginations, I told myself. It didn't mean anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt different, like it was holding its breath. Around midnight, I got up to check on Lily. When I opened her door, my heart stopped. Annabelle wasn't on the shelf. She was sitting in the middle of the floor, facing the bed. My pulse quickened as I stepped into the room, careful not to wake Lily. I picked up the doll, its glass eyes gleaming in the dim light, and placed it back on the shelf. I stared at it for a long moment, willing it to stay put before leaving the room. I barely made it 2 steps into the hallway when I heard a loud thump behind me. I turned, and my blood ran cold. Annabelle was back on the floor. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, clutching a flashlight and listening for every creak and groan of the old house. Around 3 a.m., the faint sound of laughter echoed from upstairs. It wasn't Lily's laughter. I bolted up the stairs, my heart hammering. Lily's door was wide open, and her bed was empty. The sound of giggles drifted from the attic. "No," I whispered, fear tightening around my chest. I climbed the attic stairs slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. The door at the top creaked open, revealing the dim, dusty space. Lily was standing in the center of the attic, her back to me, holding Annabelle in her arms. "Lily," I said, my voice shaking, "what are you doing up here?" "She wanted me to bring her back," Lily said without turning around. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Back where?" "To her home." The shadows in the attic shifted, and the air grew colder. Annabelle's glass eyes seemed to glow faintly, and I realized with a sickening jolt that the symbols carved into the walls around us were the same as the ones in the box. The attic door slammed shut behind me, and the light from my flashlight flickered. Lily turned slowly, but her expression wasn't her own. Her eyes were dark, her face pale, and her lips curled into a smile that didn't belong on a child. "She likes it here," Lily said, her voice layered with something older, deeper. The flashlight died, plunging the attic into darkness. And then, in the pitch black, I heard it. The soft, unmistakable sound of porcelain feet moving across the wooden floor. I reached for Lily, but something cold and small grabbed my wrist. The last thing I saw was Annabelle's face, grinning as the world around me dissolved into whispers and laughter. It was a cold, gray morning in late autumn, the kind of day when the sky seemed permanently overcast and the world felt muted. I just made a pot of coffee and was settling in for a quiet Saturday when I decided to grab the mail. As I opened the front door, a chill wind swept past me, carrying with it the faint smell of damp leaves. That's when I saw it. Sitting on the welcome mat was a doll. It wasn't large, maybe a foot tall, with a porcelain face and a dress that looked old, like something out of the 19th century. The dress was frayed at the edges, the once white lace now yellowed with age. Its hair was dark and curly, its glassy blue eyes staring straight ahead. I froze, the warm mug of coffee in my hand suddenly feeling too hot against my skin. I lived alone in a small neighborhood where everyone kept to themselves. Who would leave something like this? "Maybe it's a prank," I muttered, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. I looked around, scanning the empty street, but there was no sign of anyone, just the wind, rattling the branches of the bare trees. I knelt down and picked up the doll. Its porcelain skin was cold, almost icy, and the weight of it felt heavier than it should have. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. There was no note, no explanation, just the doll. I brought it inside, setting it on the kitchen counter as I flipped through the rest of the mail. Bills, junk flyers, nothing unusual. But my gaze kept drifting back to the doll. It sat perfectly upright, its head tilted slightly to the side, as if it were watching me. "You're just a doll," I said out loud, as if saying it would dispel the unease. But even as I tried to convince myself, I couldn't help but notice the way its eyes seemed to follow me no matter where I stood. I decided to put it in the trash. It wasn't mine, and I had no interest in keeping it. I carried it to the garbage can in the backyard and dropped it in, slamming the lid shut. The sound echoed in the still air, and for a moment I felt relieved. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, the old house creaking with every gust. I tossed and turned, but something kept nagging at me, a feeling I couldn't shake. Finally, around 2 a.m., I got up to grab a glass of water. As I walked into the kitchen, I froze. The doll was sitting on the counter. I stared at it, my pulse hammering in my ears. I knew I'd thrown it away. There was no way it could be here. My hands shook as I approached it, my breath visible in the cold air that seemed to fill the room. "How?" I whispered, but I couldn't finish the thought. I grabbed the doll again, taking it out to the curb this time. I opened the trash can, tossed it inside, and slammed the lid shut. Just to be sure, I placed a brick on top of the lid, securing it. My breath fogged in the air as I stood there for a moment, staring at the trash can. Satisfied, I went back inside and locked the door. The next morning, I woke to a faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was the wind rattling the windows, but it was too rhythmic, too deliberate. I got up, groggy and annoyed, and made my way to the front door. The tapping stopped as I approached. Slowly, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. The doll was sitting on the welcome mat again. This time its head was tilted at an odd angle, and its hand was raised as if it had been knocking. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I didn't know what to do. It was impossible. There was no way it could have gotten out of the trash, no way it could have made it back to the house. I looked around the empty street again, my paranoia growing. The air felt heavier, colder, as if the world itself was pressing in on me. I grabbed the doll and threw it into the garage, slamming the door shut behind me. This time I locked it, double-checking the bolt. Whatever was happening, I didn't want to see that thing again. That night, I heard footsteps. They were soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. They echoed through the hallway, growing louder as they approached my bedroom. I held my breath, gripping the blanket tightly. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel the sweat trickling down my back. And then the doorknob turned. I bolted upright, staring at the door as it creaked open slowly. In the dim light from the hallway, I saw it, the doll. It stood in the doorway, its glassy eyes reflecting the faint light, its head tilted unnaturally. It moved. Not like a person, its movements were jerky, like a puppet on strings. It took a step into the room, its porcelain face cracking slightly as its smile widened. "You shouldn't have thrown me away," it said, its voice high-pitched and distorted, like a child's voice warped through static. I scrambled out of bed, backing away as it took another step. Its glassy eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. "Stay with me," it whispered. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and hurled it at the doll. The impact shattered its face, but instead of breaking apart, it laughed. The sound was hollow, echoing as if it were coming from everywhere at once. "You can't get rid of me," it hissed, its voice now layered with something deeper, darker. "I'm yours now." The lights in the room flickered and the temperature plummeted. Shadows crawled across the walls, twisting and writhing as the doll stepped closer. I could feel the weight of its presence, the air growing thicker, suffocating. I ran. I didn't grab anything, just ran out of the house and into the freezing night. I didn't stop until I reached the end of the street, my breath fogging in the air as I turned to look back. The house was dark, the front door wide open, and standing on the porch, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights, was the doll. It raised one hand, waving slowly. I never went back to that house. I moved to a new city, leaving everything behind. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint sound of tapping at my door. And when I look outside, there's nothing there, just the faint imprint of a small doll-like hand in the frost on the glass.